Pledge
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call the roll, please. Here.
Here.
Mr. Blair?
Here.
Mr. Butler?
Here.
Mr. Hart?
Here.
Vice Mayor Cook?
Here.
Mr. King?
Here.
Welcome, everyone. With us tonight, we have our Director of Finance, Mark Medler, Clerk of Council, Misty Brent, City Manager Dave Kennedy, City Solicitor Joe Braun, Assistant City Manager Tom Smith, and Lieutenant Spock is our Sergeant at Arms tonight. We have former council members Neil Orey, Todd Osborne, and Pat Mays. I think I've got everybody, so welcome. First order of business is open forum. Robert Bowl.
Hi, my name is Robert Bowl. I live at 269 Glen Lake Road at the very west end of the city. And the reason I'm making a presentation tonight is to discuss the garage. There's two aspects of the situation that I'm interested in, and one is that we have a referendum and public hearings. And it is in the tradition of Loveland to have referendums. I moved here in July of 2007, and at that time, Loveland had a referendum for the pool, the YMCA pool next to Phillips Park, and it lost in the vote. But it was put back onto the ballot in, I believe, November, and at that time I voted for the pool, but I was in the minority, and I respect the democratic process. But you have to have a referendum and public hearings for it to truly be a democratic process. If we don't have this referendum about the garage or public hearings, then I don't think the City Council's duty is being done. And the other aspect, Mr. Kennedy, you're quoted in the paper as saying that the parking garage would add approximately 46% spaces to the current inventory in downtown Loveland, parking spaces. And my proposal is analogous to, say you want to travel the country by RV. Most sensible people would not immediately go out and buy an RV. They would both research it and they would probably rent one to see if they like the RV lifestyle, and if they do, then they would go out and buy one. And I'm saying, instead of going, well, what I call a whole hog and building a two-story, over $7 million parking garage, start with the land that's already been acquired, pave it, landscape it. That would add approximately 23%, 130 to 150 spaces by your own count, because the second story wouldn't be there, and see how that works out. If it meets the current needs, then we're home free. We don't have to spend as much money. If it turns out that that doesn't meet the current needs and we need that second story, you can still always build the garage on just an asphalt paved lot without having wasted very much money. Those are my 2 points. I hope they have influenced you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Lauren Enda.
Speaking to me, I'm going deaf and I couldn't hear. Oh, sorry.
Good evening, my name is Lauren Enda, 5753 Bristol Court. First, I would like to publicly thank all those who braved the cold and lent their voice to the rally held on Saturday afternoon in the downtown area. 17 of us gathered signatures, spoke to passersby, and held signs aloft to appeal to council to create a committee, provide data, research options, and allow for a referendum on the garage. This was certainly democracy in action. Our efforts were rewarded with much horn honking, waves, and claps. 75 signatures were gathered that afternoon in approximately 90 minutes. These signatures are in addition to the over 130 signatures that have already been registered online. More than speaking at council meetings, the rally and support for the rally epitomized the widespread controversy about the garage. The rally was highlighted on WCPO's Saturday Evening News at 11 and in an article in Loveland magazine. I also want to thank the Loveland Police, for offering their welcome and assistance during the rally. They could not have been more gracious. I do not remember their names, but I'm sure that you will, and please pass on our thanks. There's been much talk about funding for the garage, grants, COVID funds, bond issues. Tonight I want to briefly touch on one of the grants that Loveland applied for and was awarded from the Ohio Capital Budget Fund for $900,000. This generous grant was awarded in May of 2021 and is being facilitated by the Ohio Department of Natural Resources. The ODNR notified me and city officials last week that due to inaccuracies in the grant submission, they were launching an internal environmental review process on the application. One of the main concerns is that Loveland told the ODNR that the garage would not be built on a floodplain. But of course, it will be built on a floodplain. ODNR's review process will take 30 to 45 days. Once the results are finalized, Loveland will be given the opportunity for compliance if necessary. The grant application to the Economic Development Administration for over $3 million also contains inaccurate and incomplete information. Details on that application will be discussed at a later date. At the goal-setting meeting this past Saturday morning, Council decided not to create a parking committee. Loveland has 17 other committees, but it appears that Council wants no meaningful input from or discussion with residents concerning the parking issues. But how easy it would be to have a respectful discussion between residents and council about parking. How easy and helpful it would be to work on issues together and make some real progress. How easy it would be to put controversy to rest and instead engage everyone in the conversation. How easy it would be to let go of the us versus them dynamic and create one team working toward a thriving Loveland. Isn't that what we all want? I sure hope so. Thank you.
Thank you. Neil Laurie?
If I could, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Butler.
On Saturday, we talked briefly about the idea of a traffic and parking committee, and I just want to reinforce Ms. Enda's point. The comment was made that these were issues which are traditionally held by publicly elected officials, but I think that's the same for finance, for parks and recreation, going on down the list, planning and zoning, et cetera. But we, in our wisdom, enlist the assistance of citizens to assist us as elected council members on these important issues. And it does two things. One, it allows us to tap into the wisdom of the crowd, if you will, of the public. And two, it enables a joint interaction between us as publicly elected officials and the public, and allows their involvement and feeling of participation in the process. So I would ask my colleagues to, again, rethink, and at the proper time, not necessarily tonight, that we rethink the idea of a traffic and parking committee, because I think you would ask any resident, and we've seen it on social media and everywhere, that these are the two most vexing problems for our city, and let's enlist the assistance of the public. They have knowledge, they have experience, and they are involved in it every day. So just ask my colleagues to keep an open mind about that.
If I could, I think we have an open mind about it. We talked about it for at least a half hour on Saturday, maybe longer, and I had lots of explanations, thoughts, ideas. Bringing it up again as though we didn't give it its due consideration is a bit offensive, because we actually did give it a lot of consideration, and we all spoke about it, and we all had our thoughts and reached a conclusion together. Neil Laurie.
Could I respond to that, Mayor?
We're moving on. Neil Laurie.
I'm also here to speak about the garage. In my opinion, it's time to stop all the criticism, fault finding, disapproval on this project until something is concrete, okay? Until we know what we are really going to do. And I'm going to refer back to October 26, 2021, during open forum. I addressed City Council from here, from this pulpit. And here's some of the statements I made. Council is working on solutions to parking, traffic, and a new garage. And I started, that council has not signed a contract to build a garage or made a final commitment to build a garage. I also said that a shovel would not go in the ground until the grant funding amounts are finalized and confirmed, construction costs are itemized and finalized with real bids, operating expenses are examined and analyzed, public meetings are held, residents are engaged, and dialogue is complete with full transparency. This council that's seated here tonight was elected by our residents. Let's let them do their job. Okay? They have assured us over and over that there will be full transparency, there will be community engagements and dialogue. When it's time, we'll do that. Thank you.
Mr. Blair?
Mayor Bailey, I want to thank Mr. Ori for his comments. For the last several months, there has been all kinds of wild speculation, false narratives, and agenda padding on the parts of a lot of different people. And you're the first one since your open forum appearance in October to simply state the facts, that no decisions have been made. We've got nothing to decide on because the proposals are all out there, are incomplete, and there will be plenty of time for anybody who wants to talk about it once we have something to talk about. We have nothing to talk about yet. We don't know what the grant status is going to end up. We haven't figured out any of the costs involved. We haven't looked at anything more than sketches on what it might be. I can assure you any garage that's built is not going to be longer than a football field, which is out there, and it needs to stop. Everybody has a perfect right to appear before council and say pretty much any dang thing they want to say, but it would be nice if they stuck to the facts, and most of the facts about the garage aren't known. Thank you.
Thank you. Shonda Gentry?
Good evening, Council. I want to continue to talk about parking in the proposed garage, everyone's favorite topic. To continue with my outline last meeting about work that has already been done to solve the parking issue. As a quick reminder, in 2017, a fire occurred in historic downtown, resulting in major rebuilding and investments by several business owners to the tune of $6 million. I know that many voices that have been heard didn't live in Loveland at that time, so setting the stage is important. In 2018, a Loveland collector trail and river crossing feasibility was conducted. The recommendations from that included a separate bicycle and parking facility along Loveland Madeira to serve as a collector with multiple ways to get into town from there. It included encroachments on adjacent property, private properties to allow the trail to be extended to this collector, which resulted in residents along West Loveland taking issue with this proposal, vehement issue. This was envisioned to continue down West Loveland and across the bridge. Another recommendation was to modify the second railroad trestle to accommodate a bike lane across the bridge. This idea was discussed with the railroad, and the city was told a firm no. Also in 2018, the city installed new technology to the downtown traffic lights to improve traffic flow. They also completed the lane improvements from the bridge to Carl Brown Way. October 5th of 2018, Mr. Kennedy met with local business owners to discuss possibilities to reduce traffic and parking issues in downtown. January of 2019, the Ross lots were topped with gravel to create new parking on the land purchased for the proposed garage. The February 15th, 2019 memo to council from Dave Kennedy noted that Chief Huber, Mr. Kennedy, and Mr. Smith met with a firm to review the proposal for valet services to be provided on weekends in an effort to relieve parking congestion. This was implemented by the Firefighters Association, but I have not noticed them offering it since the pandemic began. In May of 2019, Mr. Kennedy met with area bike clubs to promote alternative parking lots, such as the Linda Cox lot, for bikers to save the other lots for downtown business visitors. At the public hearing on August 13th of 2019 for the property purchase, parking facility development, and access improvements, the presentation included a map of parking for the city of Loveland. This was previously posted on the website in June, accounting for 608 city parking spaces. This does not include private lots. The presentation also highlighted the wayfinding signs that were completed in 2018 as a result of the 2014 DPAC recommendation. Mr. Kennedy also outlined the due diligence that had been completed prior to this public hearing, including environmental site analysis and subsurface investigation and geotechnical recommendations. And I'm not going to say the name of the consulting service because I will completely mess it up. They are a geotechnical environmental materials testing engineering firm from Carmel, Indiana, with 40 years experience and have scientists and environmental health professionals on staff. Their assessment met the requirements of the American Society for Testing Materials, and their analysis revealed no historic recognized environmental conditions, no controlled recognized environmental conditions, or no recognized environmental conditions on the property. At the Planning and Zoning Commission on August 20th, 2019, Mr. Nickel from Yard & Company stated, two major issues of the creation of their submitted downtown plan was parking and traffic, and the idea of going in feet first was a good way to address those issues. He went on to state that charging for parking according to demand would help in maintaining availability, and further that traffic was studied and that 20 to 30% of people 20% of the traffic was from people looking for the perfect parking spot. He also discussed the idea of overflow parking for employees, and it was stated that a valet system had been implemented and was being used to transport employees of one specific business to an overflow lot. May of 2020, a surface lot was created at the former McCoy lot, which will be an access point for the proposed garage if it's completed. Many of these statements may not seem like they flow together, but they address suggestions made in response to a few posts over the weekend on Nextdoor. These suggestions were great ideas.
Sorry. Thank you, Ms. Gentry. Patty Sandmare.
Oh, I'm Patty Sandmere. I live on 102 Carl Brown Way. I've been in Loveland since 1967. I'm lucky. When I started looking for apartments after I sold my house on 3rd Street, I was going to move to Over the Rhine. I looked out and found the cute little flat up above the apartments, above Cocoa Bites, that I wake up to the smell every morning, and I get to enjoy downtown Loveland on foot. However, I own a business outside of Loveland, and I still go through town to the traffic. But that brings me to the point that living downtown, Hearts of Fire was a 100% success. It was so fun. For being the first one, I think there was a big turnout. I walked around town as much as I could. I enjoyed Elvis at Cappy's. The ice sculptures were unbelievable. Whoever did those. I think we had ice sculptures at Christmas one time, and these were even better. They were fantastic. The rumors got around about everything going on. It was just phenomenal. I don't know why we didn't do this years ago. We're Loveland, you know, so I'm really lucky to live down here. I will fight the traffic. Actually, on that day, that Saturday, I was going to my work, and I got a ride to work and a ride home, so I didn't lose my parking place. we need parking. And I will fight for this garage or parking till the end, and I live down here. I don't mind fighting the traffic coming to and from work. I sit there and I take time to relax and enjoy, and I chill out before I get home. I can come home, I can walk around Loveland, I can visit whatever place I want. I don't have to leave Loveland. So I just want to thank you guys, Misty, whatever you had to do with Hearts of Fire. I hope we do it every year. I think it'll really grow, and I can't imagine it growing bigger because that was all of town involved in that. I'm just floored. I'm really floored at how cool that turned out. So I just want to thank everybody who put it together, who worked on it, who collaborated. What a fantastic idea. So I just needed to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. I do think I had this later in the agenda, but now's the time. Ms. Brents and her committee put together one heck of a fantastic weekend. There was something for everyone to do, from young children to adults. It really was. You hit it out of the ballpark, you and your committee. So thank you from all of us. It was fantastic. Tom Scovanner. Mr. Scovanner, I can't read what your
Minutes.
Subject. Sorry?
Minutes.
Okay.
During the last council meeting, there was a discussion concerning the minutes of council meetings and the over-reliance, and I think misrepresentation as to Robert's Rules of Orders as to the council meeting. While open records of public bodies is a topic I have some familiar with, I did some additional research on the issue. A leading Ohio Supreme Court case on the issue is White versus Clinton County Board of Commissioners. In that case, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of White's claim that the public records were incomplete and that the case in particular dealt with a county commission meeting. In the opinion, it made it quite clear that the law applies to all public bodies under Ohio Revised Code 121.22. Applies to this public body specifically. Not one time does the Supreme Court refer to Robert's Rules. It is the Ohio Revised Code as interpreted by the courts that controls the minutes of the public body, not Robert's Rules. I apologize in advance that I'm going to quote the opinion in some detail, but I believe it's necessary in this situation. In that unanimous Supreme Court opinion, Justice Stratton wrote, quote, "The question arises as to what is meant by a full record. To understand what is meant by a full record, one must look to the purpose and meaning behind keeping records. Accurate records serve many useful functions. First, such records provide rich detail to the history and culture of our country as government officials embody the wishes and desires of the people. Second, public scrutiny is necessary to enable the ordinary citizen to evaluate the workings of his or her government and to hold government accountable. Third, keeping full minutes allows members of the public who are unable to attend the meetings in person to obtain a complete and accurate information." End quote. Later discussing the duties of the board in keeping a full record of the board's proceedings, the court ruled that the Ohio Revised Code implicitly includes a duty on the part of the clerk and the board to comply with the more comprehensive requirements of Ohio Revised Code 121.22. Justice Stratton further wrote, quote, "Had the commissioners maintained a full record that included the rationale and decision-making process of the orders that they had issued, White would have had a better understanding of these orders. She could have challenged the rationale for these orders. She could have understood the process and accepted the commissioner's decision, but with no discussion, no decision-making process of or the orders that were ultimately issued, White was unable to exercise her rights as a citizen to challenge the decision of those public bodies elected to represent her. Full disclosure would have removed the process's secretive nature and opened the public scrutiny." End quote. Unfortunately, these facts make clear that the board in that case precisely did not do that. The importance of full and complete records was again raised the following year when the Supreme Court ordered a total of $57,940 to be paid to White from the public body because that body had failed to correct the insufficiency in the minutes. The court in that follow-up opinion stated, as a result of this case, boards must include sufficient facts and information in their records so that the public will understand and appreciate the rationale behind the decisions reflected in the records. The board maintained minutes of its meetings, but the minutes lack sufficient detail to constitute a full record of the proceedings of the board, end quote. And this brings me to the last council meeting. The minutes were approved or fall from being a full record. Sharon Scovanner's presentation before the council was 927 words. The summary was a mere 51 words. If one simply reads the minutes, you would not know that Sharon read 27 quotes from individuals expressing frustration and disappointment with the developments in Loveland. Additionally, you would not know that at the end of her presentation, council was asked by a show of hands who agreed that there's traffic congestion problems in downtown Loveland. The record did not show that Mr. Phelps, Mr. Hart, Mr. Butler, and Mr. Bateman acknowledged this by a show of hands, while 3 other board members did not. Nor does the approved record indicate the mayor's dismissal of Sharon's concerns. These are all data points that explain the rationale and decision-making process of the orders that were issued, so people could understand the process and accept the council member's decision. After all, council members have the final word after open forum to explain their positions if they do disagree with the citizens' presentation. None did. Looking at the summaries of other presentations that night, it's interesting that Sharon's presentation summary was 5% of her speech. Other summaries were 38, 45, and 51% of their speeches. Previously, Sharon's statements had 77 and 32% of her speeches summarized. But suddenly, Sharon's summaries reduced to insignificance. Understand, this severe reduction occurred even though the Word documents of Sharon's speech were provided as requested in order to make it easier to fully and accurately summarize her speech. While I'm encouraged that since that hearing and my letter to Mr. Braun concerning this issue, Loveland has reminded all council members that they need, all committee members, that they need to complete training on open records. What I'm asking is that the minutes of the meeting of January 25th, 2022, the City Council meeting, be amended to include a full and accurate representation of Sharon Scovanner's speech, which Loveland has possession of. Full, accurate, and transparency should be a standard, not misleading editorializing. Thank you.
Todd Osborne?
Todd Osborne, 1100 Sunrise. Good evening, Council. Over the last few weeks, the intensity of the downtown parking infrastructure program has been cranked up, and I think unnecessarily. And honestly, it makes little sense. A majority of the rhetoric has been based on dollars. So I reviewed the 2019, 2020, and the first half of the 2021 council minutes. What's said in those minutes has importance, not necessarily open forum, but when the council body has had discussion, that's where the importance lies. Reviewing the council minutes show that the city has received grants for $250,000 and $900,000, along with $2.58 million in COVID American Rescue Plan aid, which this project qualifies under. A total of $3,730,000, and congratulations to the city staff. Now I add the $3.2 million being requested in an additional federal grant, using the $3.7 million as a 50% matching portion. Mr. Kennedy has stated that if the city doesn't receive that grant amount, he won't bring a proposal to council for a 5.2 to 6.2 or 5.8 to 6.2 million dollar facility. And if I've done my math correctly, I understand, or let's see, if the city does receive this grant, the city can proceed, and it won't cost the taxpayers 1 cent. I understand that there will be stormwater management and additional street parking alignment along with a streetscape, but that's mostly covered under the various budgets and enterprise funds. So the treasury of Loveland won't really be tapped. Far from the bogus claims that this will cost the taxpayers of Loveland at least $7 million. This is the first step. Budget and plan to build within a budget. That's being proper public stewards of the treasury. If Loveland didn't apply for the federal funds, they would have gone elsewhere. I'd rather see some of my federal tax dollars returned to the city. So the parking lot apparently will cost almost nothing. Then what is the issue? The Little Miami Conservancy and the Friends of the Little Miami State Park have blessed this project. Again, what is the issue? And if Sierra Club was truly concerned about Loveland, they'd waltz back into federal court and relieve the Metropolitan Sewer District ratepayers of Loveland from paying on the rest of the MSD consent decree. Loveland will always have growing pains. Parking and traffic have been in front of every council since the early 70s. Comprehensive master plans, various studies, and committees have spoken, along with a vast public input. To say that the public hasn't said a word about this, come on. It's progress, even if it took 50 years. Oh, and for free parking, I hear this. For free parking, I hear a 7-minute walk from Overlook and Century Hill could be an option. Thank you.
All right.
Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Butler.
I would like to respond to a specific point raised by Mr. Osborne. He referenced the $2+ million of COVID relief fund as being something that could be used to offset the cost of the parking garage. About a month ago, I attended a webinar from the Ohio Department of Treasury on the appropriate uses of ARPA funds by municipalities. And in that webinar, it was very specifically stated that the construction of a large capital project for general economic development or to aid impacted industries would be presumed ineligible by the Department of Treasury. So if that is ever presented to this council as a source of funding for this garage, I will fight that hard, and I believe that the Department of Treasury's regulations do not support the use of ARPA funds for this garage.
All right, review and approval of minutes. Oh, yes, Mr. Hart.
Am I allowed to go backwards in Mr. Scovier's comment?
Sure.
He was talking quite quickly, so I was taking a process for a second. I just want to be, in the effort to maintain transparency, Mrs. Scovaner's paper that she handed us did not include the entirety of her comments for the night. Her comments tonight were well taken, and I think summarized well by Ms. Brent's. It was just a listing of the comments she had collected from next door or online or wherever she had collected those from. And secondly, I think that it is kind of being insinuated that throughout, because I've also seen, if we're going to talk about comments online, that that we were presented with a motion to include the entirety verbatim of the of her comments. And if you would do a simple records request, you would find out that that was not what the motion was about. The changes that Mr. Butler wanted to make, that while vetted, were not a verbatim transcript of those comments that night. Just trying to maintain full transparency about what was going on in terms of those minutes at that meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Hart.
If I could, Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Butler.
Yeah, just Mr. Hart's correct. The amended minutes which I proposed did not include a list of the 27 some comments from the public, but they did reflect the interchange between Ms. Scovaner and council regarding whether traffic is a concern in the city of Loveland, her asking for a show of hands, and her exchange with the mayor regarding the validity of that question, which I felt, she felt expressed to me as a member of the public, that was an important element of her presentation that evening, and I agreed with her. Council did not agree with me, and that's certainly the process in action, but that was certainly a part of the amended minutes.
All right, moving on to the review and approval of minutes from the February 8th meeting. Are there any changes, additions to those minutes? Mr. Butler?
Yeah, this one I think council will agree with, I'm hoping. On page 11, it's just simply a word change, which I think changes the essence of the discussion. I asked, was the levy formally placed on the ballot? And I think that the transcription was formerly placed on the ballot. So I would just move to amend by changing the word formerly to formally, which was my comment on at that meeting.
Mr. Phelps?
I'll
Vice
second
Mayor?
that.
Any discussion? Call the roll, please.
Page 11.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Any other comments, additions? Can we have a motion to approve the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
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 Motion carries 7-0.
All right, next is public hearing. Need a motion to open the public hearing? Vice Mayor?
I'll move to open the public hearing that's been previously noticed for pursuant to Section 107.01A of the City of Loveland to receive comments regarding the proposed issuance of an easement within the right-of-way along a portion of South Carl Brown Way.
Mr. Scovanner?
We didn't have a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, let's
I'll
do that.
second the motion to open the public hearing.
Thank you. Call the roll, please.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
Mr. Scovanner?
I don't have quite much to say, so I won't speak quite as quickly this time. So, as many of you know, I'm an assistant prosecutor, and I prosecute a lot of traffic situations, a lot of traffic collisions and injuries. And previous to that, I worked with the engineering county that I worked in, and striving to keep things out of the right of way, move the right of way back, so that we have less obstruction, so we have less problems with people driving are either distracted by things in the right of way or strike things in the right of way. We're talking about putting a sign in the right of way, and that just doesn't make any sense to me from a safety standpoint, from a distraction standpoint. I had a conversation with a Loveland officer a few months back. He told me that most of OBI impaired driving people in Loveland are discovered because they run into things. It's not because we stop them. So by putting things in the right of way, I think we're creating some problems. Now, it's Carl Brown. It's not very fast. I get that. But the other thing that I have, a couple other points that I have is, why is this even being requested? I mean, if someone's going somewhere nowadays, I think they look at their cell phone, their iPhone, or whatever phone that they have, type in the name of the business that they would get to or the address, and that gives them directions. Most phones will talk to you, so it's hands-free. You don't have to look at your phone. So this isn't a distraction when you're trying to find whatever businesses that you're trying to find. By approving this sign in the right of way, we're also, as we've identified on other occasions and other instances, we're setting precedent. Do we want to now, you know, how do we say no to the next person that wants to put something in the right of way to identify their business? Are those businesses, don't they have signs already up? I know condos has, the names are up there. You can see them. It's just, it makes no sense to me. And then, if we do this, I have real concern because of the term, how long this is. It's a 10-year term. Now, we said we could terminate it if we need it for a public purpose. But that then begs the question, potentially, what's a public purpose? So council decides 3, 4, 5 years from now that we need that right of way for a public purpose, and the property owner says, well, no, I've got this contract with you, and I don't believe that it's a public purpose. So now we're moving forward. If we're going to do this, and I highly recommend not, for many reasons, do it for a term of 1 year. I mean, there are other designs, there are other ideas of use of Carl Brown that may conflict with this. We don't know what the future is going to hold. We know there's going to be changes in downtown Loveland. So if you do approve this, do it for 1 year. We can always sign another 1-year contract, get a 1-year contract. That's not a big deal. And to top it all off, $1? Really? $1. If this is so important to this business, at least make it a reasonable fee. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have a motion motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0.
All right, next we have a second reading. Can go ahead and, well, I guess we can comment. Let's comment on this. You want to talk about it now or when we get to the, Mr. Bateman?
I'm just curious, isn't there a sign like this already in, just like this currently? I'm not sure. I swear I was there yesterday, like over the weekend, and I thought I saw this sign or a wayfinding sign much like this. This is a rendering that we're looking at, right? So I'm assuming that the current sign is.
I have not been over there. Only the front portion of the sign is into the right-of-way. It's a very, very small amount that actually extends into the right-of-way. The on-street parking causes an issue from the visibility standpoint. It is not a full projection into the right-of-way. To get the visibility, when this project was done, if you recall, a building was removed that took us from a very narrow, dangerous alley to a much larger area that included public parking. The way the on-street parking is in place, what we've tried to do to accommodate spaces in front of the bank building, the property owner who owns those has asked to project it slightly into the right-of-way. I believe in following the rules, and it projects only a small amount to get the visibility that is needed. You can adjust the term for any standpoint. I tried to, I can better define public purpose, but we allow seating in the right-of-way. We allowed fencing in the right-of-way. You could argue that 107.01A does not actually deal with this particular real property belonging to the city shall be sold or leased. You could argue that we don't even need to do a public hearing for these type of items, but we choose to do a public hearing for these items. But as far as its full projection, it is a very minimal amount. I've stood out there, and for me to go farther back, I don't think it has any benefit to go forward. I've stood there multiple times. I don't believe where a vehicle would be, it will cause any visibility issues. But I'm certainly acceptable to any item that you want to have, because again, 107.01A does not necessarily require a public hearing for a license to be issued.
Mr. Butler?
Dave, you mentioned that it's only a small section of the sign that's actually in the right-of-way. It's, as depicted on page 21, there's like a little island, if you will, with mulch and planting and so forth. Does the city own that, or does the property owner own that?
We own a very small portion of it at about where those green plants are. The middle of that green plant forward, we're going to be doing sidewalks in front of Tahana with a 50-50 match with the property owner this summer. So we know where the sidewalks are going to go. If there's any utility relocations, any utilities in any way, shape, or form, we have all the rights to pull the sign, do whatever we want. I don't know of a business in this downtown district or any business that we haven't bent over backwards to try to help them with. This is supporting multiple businesses in the downtown district. I think the public improvement that was made to the traffic flow in this area largely went unnoticed and got very little credit for what was accomplished from an alley that, to me, was a massive safety issue. You came flying down that alley onto Carl Brown, no rhyme or reason. And again, this is only a first reading. I can make any adjustments that you want to the.
So the actual right-of-way is runs. Let me think of this: north and south along that mulch bed. That's where the city's right-of-way is?
Yes, we don't typically care too much.
And it's like about halfway through those plants that we see on page 21?
Not halfway, about the front quarter of it.
Front quarter. So if that sign moved back a foot, it wouldn't even be in the right-of-way.
About 2 feet, which would put it into that one area there, yes.
Yeah. Okay. And when the building was constructed, was there any kind of need for the owner to obtain any kind of licensing for the present landscaping and so forth from the city?
We don't usually bicker too much about landscaping because we consider it an improvement.
Sure.
The existing trees, from what I stood out there, are a natural barrier as it is. So I felt that the proposed location, which I took to the Historic Preservation and Planning Committee for approval, I felt I don't sit and just look at pictures. I physically go out there multiple occasions to look at it. I stood as a person. I stood as a vehicle because I know where the utilities are. I know where the sidewalks are going in, and
the sidewalks we're talking about would be to the left of this sign as we're looking
yes,
at
in
it.
front of the Tohana, 50/50
Okay.
match with the new brick design.
And how wide are those sidewalks?
ADA code will be 5 feet.
5 feet. Okay. Thanks.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I just observed that, I picking up on what Mr. Scovaner said, indeed, something that intrudes onto a right-of-way or a roadway indeed can pose a safety problem. But I think in this instance, what I think is the counter to that is that there's a safety element and problem insofar as drivers looking for either the landing, event center, or roadie don't know where it is, especially people coming in from out of the area. And the natural tendency, because that curve is coming up, is true, to slow down. But it's also to look at the curve as opposed to where the entrance is for the destination, if it's roadie or the landing event center. And I think this is perhaps going to enhance safety insofar as people will be able to know exactly where they're going to turn. And while we all use Google, it doesn't tell you, or maps, it doesn't always tell you where to turn. It just tells you you're at your destination. Oftentimes I've found I don't know where to turn. So that's just my 2 cents.
Mr. Bateman?
2 things. One, I'd hate to keep going back to this, but I swear I saw this sign already there.
I wouldn't put it past
And
them.
if it's
Katie,
not
go look.
already there, I mean, I just wonder if there's something, it seems a little premature to have seen this sign unless they...
There was like a folder thing there. They put like a little folder thing.
Is it like a temporary sign? Okay, all right. Well, I don't know. I don't remember. I didn't connect the dots. I was with my toddler at the time. So, but anyway, sorry about that. The second question I have was, I know we have a streetscape committee, and when we talked a lot at the strategic goal-setting retreat this past weekend, one of the first topics we tackled was, the interconnectedness, the need to have walkability, the development of particularly Carl Brown Way. And so I just wonder if having this sign in the right-of-way is in any way going to, hinder the ability of that streetscape committee to design something that they're looking to. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's some massive stone, monument of any kind, but still, I just wonder if allowing the streetscape committee to have free reign on the right-of-way at that street, level is more appropriate than allowing businesses to have a more clear wayfinding sign.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Blair.
Mr. Kennedy, just for my own clarification, the sidewalks are going to go in this picture, like from the quarter of that one little bush further to the left, yes?
The sidewalks are to go in front of the patio area,
So to the left of the drawing.
the left of the drawing, up in this area here.
Okay, so this sign will be fully to the right of the sidewalk?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so any impingement at that point on the right-of-way will be certainly mitigated by the fact that there's a full ADA sidewalk going in to the left of the entire bed. Yes?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And I think to your point, and Mr. Bateman, that is a good point with the streetscape, but I think here, that committee wouldn't have a whole lot to say here, given that it's a very skinny part that is actually our right-of-way. The majority of that mulch bed is not our right-of-way. So I'm not sure that we'd be impeding that in any way. Mr. Braun, you being our city solicitor, you've reviewed this license agreement. Do you have any concern that we wouldn't be able, if we had some reason that we needed to end this agreement sooner than 10 years, do you have any concern that we would not have ample opportunities to do that?
No.
Thank you. Any other comment? All right, that's the first reading only, correct?
We haven't read it yet.
All right. You want to read the, well, have you read it? No, we're not there yet, are we? We're at the, getting me all confused. All right, why don't we go to the second reading? Let's not talk about this all again on the next ordinance. 11A, go ahead and read that one.
Ordinance amending the employment agreement and increasing the compensation of the city manager, David Kennedy.
Thank you. We discussed this last week. Is there any further?
Yeah,
Mr. Bateman?
I'd like to take a crack at complimenting Mr. Kennedy. He does a great job. He's a great public servant. He's really fantastic at developing a vision in the purest sense of development, in terms of understanding where we are, where we need to go, and how to get there. From the actual job description, though, I think the one thing I'll say is I don't know that when he got here, this was the most desirable place to be working as a city manager, and I think he's made the job a very attractive job for folks in that field. And I think that goes to his character, his experience, and just those great opportunities where the right person meets the right opportunity. So I'm certainly grateful for him being here in Loveland and the privilege of working with him.
Thank you, Mr. Bateman. Anyone else? Yes, Mr. Hart?
I just think it's important to kind of restate what Mr. Butler said last meeting about this, in terms of the economics of the decision. I know that 7% may sound like a bit much, but it really just brings us into even the competitive range when it comes to that, what Mr. Kennedy's doing for us. And I know he's not feigning his disapproval of this discussion, but we certainly appreciate what he does, and the amount that we decided on is more than befitting of the job performance and the community that we live in.
Thank you. Any further comment? Well, I said it last time, but I'll say it again. I think we're extremely lucky to have Mr. Kennedy as our city manager. I don't think you'll ever find a more honest, caring, and certainly dedicated public servant than Mr. Kennedy. And we're all in Loveland very lucky to have him here. With that, let's take the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
To read it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Ping?
God knows.
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Ordinance 21 is adopted by a vote of 7-0.
All right, why don't you go ahead and read the next ordinance, first reading only.
Ordinance authorizing the city manager to execute a license agreement with Wilderness Capital LTD.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion on that? Again, first reading only. All right, I'm going to go ahead and read the next ordinance, please.
Ordinance assessing liens for unpaid utility bills on property in Hamilton County owed to the city of Loveland and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. Any comment on this ordinance? Mr. Butler?
Yes, I know the need to go through this process and assess delinquent property owners their bills, but as I've stated in the past, I feel like the more appropriate means to do this is to waive a second reading rather than declare an emergency. So I'll be voting no, not because I oppose the assessment of these bills, but rather in deference to what I think is the more appropriate manner, and that is to waive the second reading.
Any further comment? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
No.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps.
Yes.
Ordinance 22 is adopted by a vote of 6 to 1.
Read the next ordinance, please.
Ordinance assessing liens for unpaid utility bills on property in Warren County owed to the city of Loveland and declaring an emergency.
Any comment? Call the roll, please.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
No.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Ordinance 23 is adopted by a vote of 6 to 1.
Mr. Kennedy?
One of the progress I think the city did in the last 2 year goals that they completed was make a conscious effort to invest in the Heights in many ways through code enforcement, increasing code enforcement. But one of the items that the city did, which I think was pretty pivotal and pretty unique for the community, was the city took 2 parcels of land that they own. We call them the Highland Street parcels and Robinson Park. And we transferred those properties to the CIC. We then sold those properties to a residential developer who has since gone through the various zoning approvals to build very quality, affordable housing in the Heights. The last time any significant housing development was done in the Heights is well before my term here. I know Todd would be able to give us history on that, but I've always felt that the Heights is right on that tipping spot where it can go one of 2 ways, and I don't know that the one way is something that the city really desires. So I think the CIC took the role and really took an active position. And what is largely unnoticed is that they didn't take those funds from the sale of these properties and put them back into this general fund. They put it into a grant program that has in turn been putting matching owner-occupied improvements to the external parts of the housing. And I realize that there's certain topics that rise to it to levels, and I certainly appreciate that, but I think for the steps the city has taken in the Heights is really commendable, and I think you could write quite a nice article for other cities to utilize, because it wasn't simply, we've got this land, let's sell it. It was the code enforcement amendments that Tom and the Law and Ordinance put together, because you can't simply will people to maintain their properties. With that being said, we are at the 18 homes that are proposed by Aaron, the developer for this property, as it went through its staff review, which is a very detailed process the city goes through. We reached the conclusion that the width of Highland Street simply wasn't wide enough for the project. It was about 4 feet shy of the right width for the fire safety. Never an issue before. No one lived in this street. It just was never an issue. So to solve the problem, we had 2 issues. Widen the street, do it all on your own, or continue the public-private partnership. So what I proposed to do, and I got the cost estimate separately, was to widen the street to the required width to satisfy LSFD's codes, which will allow for all fire apparatus to smoothly go up and down the street. And then a separate quote to have the street resurfaced. I approached the developer about whether or not he would be willing to take on the widening portion of the roadway if the city, as part of our road program, would then come back and pave the street. So basically, we would get a per code widened street at the city's expense of simply the paving program. I then took it a step farther and recommended to the property owner that his portion of it, which would be the $21,750 to widen this street to full codes, the same width of all streets in the Heights, be put on as a property assessment, meaning it will be paid for property assessment similar to what we did for the sewer line up at Chimney Ridge over the course of 10 years. He in turn took it a step farther and said, with that, I will also run the sidewalks down from Florence all the way down to West Main on the west side of the roadway, which is a benefit to this city anytime we can get the sidewalks put in. So the problem is the same problem I had with the Chimney Ridge. I can't bring the legislation to you until the book, page, and parcel numbers are put in place by the Hamilton County auditors. But the problem is, while we wait, we want to move on. So this is one of those where I'm sort of asking for a nod or slash motion to give a comfort level to both the city. There's no expense. I won't be bringing a contract to you because it is part of the city's road program. It'll just be absorbed by the road program. If you look at the city's road program, we had $1.2 million in this year's road program. We have $268,000 carryover from last year. If you add the two together, our total budget of $1,468,000, which is crazy how much money this city is putting into their streets after years of $200,000 and $300,000. This total project is only 3% of that project. Of $21,000 we will get back through assessments, and then we get a widened street and we get a development. So if you would want to do it as a resolution, I would trust a nod. But I think from a property owner and developer standpoint, he would like to know that when I come forward with the formal legislation, which I would have gladly done, but the county will throw it out the window if it doesn't have the individual BPI numbers. So I'm in that sort of gray area. I can tell them to sit and wait. It could be months. Meanwhile, we're ready to go. I thought, and I asked Joe whether or not a motion would be sufficient. He felt a motion would be sufficient. It will not say anything different than what I outlined in here. Total project cost $21,750. Total lots 18. Total cost per lot $1,208. Total. Each lot will pay assessment of $120 over 10 years. Mark will tell you that when property assessments come in, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's very clear what that comes in as. When the Chimney Ridge sewer assessments come in, we know exactly where that fund goes to. It goes into. There's no gray area, correct, Mr. Medler? So it's not like that fund's going to just get sent in willy-nilly. It's very clear for that. So I think this is a great project, and I think this is one of the neatest things that's happened in the Heights in a long, long time. And you guys should be commended, and the CIC should be commended. But the day-to-day lives of what I do, this is sort of where I'm at. So I'm done. I'm sorry. Sorry, I felt like
Mr. Blair?
Before you run out of air.
Well, I just think it's.
I move that that City Council authorize the preparation of legislation to place the cost of widening Highland Street as a 10-year assessment on the 18 parcels within the Highland Street residence development as a 10-year assessment.
Second.
Discussion?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Dave, I would appreciate it if you could take a minute, just a minute, to talk about the terrific relationship we've had with the developer of this property to do what he's done over and above what he had to do, to and including his participation in the entire CIC program to make those grants available to residents of the Heights.
Well, Aaron is an exceptional guy. I know that Tom gets to deal with him, Eva gets to deal with him. He's a very small, it's a husband and wife operation. To have places like this, to live in the Heights on all of our public utilities with sidewalks, full stormwater management, all codes met completely. He simply was faced with a road that wasn't wide enough, our road, and is now willing to widen it on an assessment, and in lieu of that, put in sidewalks. I've been dealing with doing this for 37 years. This is a high quality project. You're going to see people owner-occupied housing. I will tell you that one of the biggest problems we deal with, and I felt this when we put out the applications for the owner-occupied grants. It's a high rental occupied area, the Heights is. And nothing negative. I'm not saying anything negative about it, but more owner-occupied housing within the Heights. These will all be owner-occupied is a benefit to the Heights as a whole. They'll be using city water, and that is more water bills. They'll be paying stormwater fees, and those are all to the benefit to the city. This area, Robinson Park, hasn't been used as a park in ages. I talked to people from Nest about it. We talked to soccer about it. It's a dog. It's used for dogs. It's not something that the kids ever wanted to play on. There was no parking for the parents when they brought their kids. We didn't take away a valuable asset from a park. So I just think we've done. I just think a lot of things get lost, and I think this was a wonderful project. So, Tom.
Mr. Smith?
if I could just compliment what Mr. Kennedy has said, so that the developer also went through the BZA process to acquire variances so that he could extend his driveways, making off-street parking, so the parking would not go in that right-of-way. So he cares about his product. He wants to make it as nice and convenient as possible.
Thank you. Mr. Butler?
When the city was trying to move the property that Chimney Ridge is now being built on, we had to change the template for development by putting forward this assessment process for the sewer line. And I supported that, and because that was city-owned property, it was a drain on the financial assets of the city. And because of that, we were able to transform the type of developers and development that would be on that property successfully. And that was a great thing. I'm glad we did that. But here, we have a situation where I'm sure I have no doubt that this person's a good developer. He's bringing a good product to the Heights, which is great. And he may be, the Bob Vila of the world, but the city's extending an interest-free loan for a 10-year interest-free loan to a developer who had already committed to the property and could easily assess the cost himself and place it on the property by increasing the cost of the product by $1,000 or $2,000 or whatever it is. In this market, I think it would be easily absorbed. As council, we need to protect the taxpayers and the taxpayers' funds, and I feel very uncomfortable extending an interest-free loan, a 10-year interest-free loan, even for the best of purposes. And I understand we had to do it for Chimney Ridge. I don't think we shouldn't get in the habit of doing this, and I'm afraid this is what we're starting to do.
Mr. Braun, you had a comment?
I just want to remind council, since Mr. Kennedy brought it up, you're not approving the assessments with this vote. What you're doing is you're giving the developer, to your point, some comfort level that council will approve them. There's some risk, obviously, to the developer because the legislation might not ultimately pass. But the city manager is correct. In order for an assessment to go on, the only way the auditor will accept it is it has to be attached and say, here are the parcels, here are the exact amounts. So I think what the developer is asking here, and to Mr. Butler's point, is it the will of council that you would be supportive of this when the final amounts are known and they come before you? So I just wanted to make it clear there will be another vote.
Mr. Blair?
May I ask Mr. Braun, so if we get to the point where the assessments are put in place and they become a liability of the property owner, yes?
That's correct.
Then it will not be a interest-free loan to the ultimate property owner, correct? Or will it?
Well, if it doesn't pass council and you don't do it as an assessment, the liability lies with the developer. And he would have to decide how to absorb that cost, if that's what you're asking.
And so that if the developer decides to levy the future homeowners the cost of this construction, it's on the developer.
That's correct.
It's not on the city making an interest-free loan.
If that's what the developer does, that's correct.
Thank you.
Any further comment, questions? Mr. Hart?
I just want to go back to, because I'm trying to process all this still. Mr. Kennedy, you said that we're going to put in the sidewalks, right? When the
developer was going to put
the sidewalks.
We don't require sidewalks. They're not required.
So we're going to get a free sidewalk out of that?
Yeah, we don't have codes in place that require sidewalks.
The rest of the Heights does have sidewalks. For
There's
the most part.
Sidewalks above it, yeah. So yes.
So it introduces or continues connectivity from the Heights by sidewalk instead of walking through roadways towards downtown.
Yes, sidewalks would be on the opposite side of the road from Robinson Park because there's existing sidewalks up the street.
Thank you.
Further comment? Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is this is, at least from my vantage point, an excellent, partnership, public-private, which is, I think, what smart cities do. And honestly, I don't see this having any negative financial impact on the city, if indeed it goes through to be an assessment, and it achieves, what we need to do, which is a widened road and a development that has amenities like sidewalks, which is what I think we've wanted for years and years. So I don't see a downside.
Mr. Bateman?
Mr. Phelps, I agree with you. I think that the public-private partnership and the fact that we originally held the land, we sold it to this developer, we incorporated it into the CIC Heights grant program, certainly speaks to the collaborative aspect of the relationship. I also think we owe a responsibility to the future residents of these units from a public safety standpoint. I think the city has an obligation to allow for, safe access to their units. So, from a responsibility standpoint of the city, this is a good thing to do, but also the right thing to do.
Mr. Butler?
As far as sidewalks, that's an amenity which is a selling point to the developer. Who knows whether the developer might have found that to be something that he wants to market for this product in any event. And second point, I have no objection to the repaving on public funds of this property or this road as part of the repaving program. I have no issues with that. But then the third thing, I have a friend of ours who was bidding on a home in the Heights recently, and she bid $15,000, $20,000 over asking and was outbid by someone who bid $25,000 over asking. The Heights is experiencing a rejuvenation of its own volition, and I don't think we need to use taxpayer money, even as an interest-free loan, even if we're going to get back over 10 years. I think it's a bad precedent, and I think the developer could easily absorb this cost in the product himself, and without the need for Loveland acting as the bank for this process.
Mr. Blair?
I'll reiterate my question to Mr. Braun. Are we creating an interest-free loan to the buyers of the property?
Well, it's not a loan per se, but it's an assessment, and it's funds that are going to be repaid to the city. There's a difference between a loan and an assessment, but I think what you're really asking me to do is to wordsmith an interpretation that's been made of it.
The suggestion has been made, excuse me for interrupting, the suggestion has been made that creating this assessment on those properties to pay for the widening of the street and the building of the sidewalks amounts to an interest-free loan. And implied in that statement is the suggestion that the city is not doing its due diligence and its fiduciary responsibility in managing the city's money.
Well, I'm not going to interpret that part of it, but I think I would point out something bigger, which is at the moment, this is a city road. This isn't a private road, so it's our responsibility at this point. So, and Mr. Kennedy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is on our street inventory, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the bigger picture, and I understand what Councilman Butler's saying, but I think from my picture is this is a road that we need to widen.
Yeah, either we're going to pay for it is what I.
My opinion is it's a road that does not meet our current standards for fire trucks. So I felt that this was a way to have the road widened, receive that money back over the course of 10 years. I guess that was the biggest part of it. Even for getting the sidewalks, I would have no plans at any time in the future to widen this roadway. Meanwhile, it is a roadway that connects portions of the Heights that will not accommodate a fire, an emergency vehicle, and a regular vehicle to pass. So from simply what I'm hoped to do on Harrison, which is bring Harrison up to the regular codes, I just thought this was an opportunity for us to take a city street that is not the code, have it widened, and place that as an assessment. That was really the root of my whole, I just thought out of it, the city receives a widened, fully functional city street. And that was really the root of it. That's why I approached it. In the developer's defense, this was not his suggestion. This was mine. So he did not make this recommendation. I did. I thought it was a good way to do it. So it's not on him at all. It's all on me. I suggested this whole proposal. So.
Yes, Mr. Ping.
If the developer chooses not to develop this property for any reason, I'm not saying he would do it because of lack of coverage of this, but if he chooses not to do this, this is a city road, the city will have to pay to repave it. And the city will pay for all of that cost. It will not go to anyone else. So from my perspective, this is not a developer with his hand out saying, give me a tax abatement, give me all kinds of special treatment. This is a developer who is saying, we'll pay for the whole thing. All he's asking us is for this assessment so that it can be spread out over a 10-year period. So in the larger picture, it seems to me that this is a way for the city to get this road paving paid for without costing the city anything. So yes, to the point of an interest-free loan, we're losing interest on, if you want to look at it that way, on this money over that course of time, but we're also removing $20,000 of paving from our paving costs. So I don't see how I can interpret this any way other than a very good thing for the city and the developer, with really no downside other than what may at first glance appear to be a downside, but it's really not in the broader picture.
Thank you. All right, I guess I would say that certainly is true. There are many portions of the Heights that are seeing amounts that are outlandish, really, which is found fantastic for that area. But this particular area where this development is going has been vacant for years, and we have been trying for years to get a development up there, and there have been several that have come and have not been able to make it happen. So we are very lucky that at this particular part of the Heights, someone is willing to bring in a project like this and a product like this. And I agree completely with Mr. Ping. This is our roadway. We really could be, it could be within, Mr. Kennedy could be here saying, we're going to pay the whole thing and should pay the whole thing. I think we're saving money by doing it this way and being good steward to the city fisc in that regard. So we do have a motion pending. Call the roll. It was seconded, was it not? Yeah, it's been seconded.
Mr. Baden?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
No.
Mr. Smart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Motion carries with a vote of 6-1.
Mr. Kennedy.
Oh, sorry. I know that maybe I'm late with everything on this. I apologize, and I don't plan to change anyone's opinions by any stretch of the imagination, but I did feel like it may be beneficial if I would just, as part of the city managers and staff reports, if I could just take one topic related to the parking facility and go into detail, and then and just email me. I'll send you a copy of what I do, what I have, and I will certainly try to answer any questions. But I just felt that I would start with, and I'm not going to take a whole lot of people's time, because I know I have a habit of rambling on about stuff, but I just thought I would go over quickly. This is just simply wanted to go over the property that the city acquired and try to put it into some perspective of how I think it sort of fits into the overall plan. And I don't have a timeline. When I looked over this right before the meeting, I probably should have put a timeline when I ended it, but I was just sort of fitting it. So I just wanted to show you that we made two separate purchases for the property. The one in blue, which we call the Ross parcels, which is the land here, we purchased, and then we later, and I can get the dates for anyone who wants, and then of course, we later purchased the McCoy properties. And I will say, then I don't have any hardcore statistics to prove it, but one of the appeals that I always felt, and it came from McGill-Smith Puncheon when they did some preliminary work for us, was that the topographic levels at this point here and the topographic levels at where it hits State Route 42 were the same, which meant that when the earth was leveled, that we would be able to have this access point. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that but I did feel that having an additional access point was important. Just a little quick, this is real quick, this is just all the parcels that were involved in the Ross parcels. So the total area that we did, that we purchased was 1.15 acres. So total of 11 parcels. There's some pretty small ones in here. I will be the first to say I've had discussions with Duke about the power grid area, and I don't know that in my time with the city I'll see that property get completely, while they do plan to take the decommission. That property, it is a web of some serious modifications within the distribution system. So I've largely moved beyond that property, but here is how we touch the areas that we touch. And these are the three buildings that we had removed from the Ross parcel. At the time, there were 2 residential structures and 1 shed. The shed largely was sort of in between where the 2 gravel roads go. They take you up to the top temporary parking area that we purchased. So these buildings were moved. Actually, we were able to receive grant funding to remove these 3 buildings. I have a little financial summary at the end. One of the items that I felt was important was the access point onto State Route 48. And I felt it was important because it will allow, in my opinion, it would allow the Warren County and the Claremont County traffic. But it's built in a manner that it's not going to be, oh, the arms are down, let's go flying through here and go. It's not built that way. And I actually, when I met with the residents a couple years ago who did not like the access point here, where it was originally, which would have lined up with here, and we modified that access point to the first floor to be down here, it really ended up being a blessing. Not only did it appease them that there would not be traffic going up and down First Street, but it even would have made it even more difficult to do any kind of dipsy-doodle through town. And that was just sort of a side item. I think that the 48 connection ties into some other items that we're trying to do. I don't think it's any secret that the city is working to acquire the mobile gas station. Not a lot of people have seen this, but this is the preliminary drawing of what we plan to do if we purchase the mobile gas station, which is a 100-foot turn lane with a 50-foot taper. This particular, the city traditionally uses Choice 1 engineer for almost all of our engineering. The only time I deviate from Choice 1 is for traffic engineering and for environmental engineering. We use TEC, and they are the premier traffic engineers. When I first asked them to look at a very preliminary stage before we began the thought of purchasing this property, Ed, as a matter of fact, Ed was the gentleman who was here to talk about the crossing at the bike trail. Ed's response to me was, Dave, if you can pull this off with mobile, this will be a home run for all the traffic on 48, because we've already invested in the smart traffic signals so that all the traffic signals would be able to talk. And one of the advantages is here, while there can be a steady flow of 48 traffic taking right and going west on West Loveland, being monitored by the cameras that know how far it backs up, while that traffic flow is a steady flow here, the traffic flow on West Loveland is able to take a left and a straight and a right, which allows for all time for some serious traffic movement. Going back to what Mr. Butler said before, one of the advantages about the Chimney Ridge development is that it's going to now feed funding into our TIF. The TIF that was put in place by the former administration, which was used to purchase what is now half of what Chimney Ridge is, was a largely undeveloped TIF, so it wasn't generating any funding. So one of the tasks that I was put on, and myself and my staff, was, Dave, we got to get a good development up there, because that would then generate that TIF. The TIF will then create a significant amount of funding. So what can we use the TIF funding for? Projects exactly like this. I can use the TIF funding to pay for the purchase of the property, because I can tie it back to benefiting that area. So that was sort of our goal. I will tell you, and it's no secret, that I've held off on the funding from the property, that the purchase of the Chimney Ridge. I've asked Mark to hold off on that funding, as I plan to use that funding as a direct leverage towards the purchase of this property when we get to that. There's no secret that we're doing this, so I'm not hiding anything. I just thought I'd come clean, and I think this is a pretty beneficial improvement. And it's not exactly how the crosswalks will line up, but I didn't pay him a lot of money to do this development. It was just due diligence I had to do, along with what I had to do with Buster, Bureau of Underground Storage Tank Removal. Same thing I had to do to find funding that I've already located to remove all the structures. So there is sort of an alignment there. The McCoy property, I should have put the dates on all these, and I did, and I apologize. McCoy property was a separate purchase X number of months following. As you recall, we did not get grant funding for the demolition. This was straight up. Funding had dried up. The property was removed, and as everyone knows, we've largely turned that into a temporary parking area. One of the advantages, the long-term process, and the reason why the McCoy property plays into my opinion, is that it allows the centralized intersection. My long-term goal, and I have a drawing and I will send it out, that I did not get it added in time, is that we have a proposal, and it's very rough. It was put together by our city engineer, where there would be a sidewalk that would which would run from the barber shop sidewalk, which would tie in and curlicue into this entryway, meaning all of these parking spaces would be removed. But by being able to extend the parking into the McCoy lot, by moving these parking spaces down, meaning the angle ones would all be perpendicular, we actually would have a net gain within the existing city parking lot of 6 spaces. And we'd have that lack of people. We would remove the constant traffic of pedestrian traffic walking down Railroad Avenue. So there is sort of the master plan of creating a centralized, all roads would lead to it. Another project that would help what we need to do to accommodate that is the Harrison Street widening. We applied for funding for the Harrison Street widening in 2021. We were not funded. We were told what we need to do to make that fundable in 2023. That will be our #1 priority project in 2023. Reason why Harrison Street project is so important is I can't move forward with anything west of where Carl Brown would come through in the Nisbet Park Master Plan, because all of the stormwater pipes through all the downtown area from basically the city parking lot goes down Harrison, hangs a right, and goes through Nisbet. All of that needs to be completely removed and widened. The Harrison Avenue project would bring that road to code, full widening. The other advantage of the Harrison Street widening, along with having sidewalks and proper width of the street, all new storm piping, curbs and gutters, the whole package, we will be able to utilize that time to strengthen these turning radiuses here are very poor. This is, anyone who knows, this is not uncommon to these kind of conflicts. So that is part of that whole project too. So that's sort of how I want to always show everything, the money from a financial standpoint. So the Ross parcels, there's our total purchase, the legal settlement involved in it, title insurance, so it was $60820. McCoy property, this is everything I can think of involved if I'm missing anything. Building demolition, the Ross properties demolition was $38,730. The McCoy property demolition was $13,500, and then the grant we received for the Ross was exactly what this. So the net cost for the demolition was $13,500. I believe, I'm not 100% sure of the habitat of that. I missed the dates, which I meant to put in there, and I missed Cindy's drawing, but it's very rough. But I will send that out to anyone But what that shows is how we're trying to create this one centralized area, and the McCoy purchase was critical. I think it really was critical. If you didn't do anything and never built a parking garage, I still think the McCoy property was important because of what it allow us to do by moving that away, removing the spaces that everyone just flies into off a railroad, putting in compliance with the downtown plan, putting in a stream of sidewalks, which will allow wherever you're parking a walk down the road. That's really all I had. I just wanted to talk on that particular topic, I think I'll try to answer any questions anybody wants. Just email me. I can send this to you. Again, I don't have the dates because I don't remember the dates. And I think Cindy's drawing I meant to include is important. It's very rough, but I meant to include that part of it. But I thought it was important because this took over some time. I thought it was important to at least show everyone. Step one is, what did the city acquire over the course of this period of time? So I'll try to have another topic. If not at the next meeting, the following, I will talk about various facades. I would talk about. I'll have the city engineer come in. I'll try to address stormwater concerns. I'll try to address finances and everything. But this was just okay. It's a bit of a softball. I agree. I started with a bit of a softball, but I think this is a good starting point to talk about what we purchased. And I would argue that the purchase price of $550 and the purchase price of $111 at today's market were some would be considered pretty good, sound purchases. And that's all I had on that.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Do you have any questions or comments, Mr. Butler?
Dave, the Duke property that you referenced north of the Ross property, is that an active part of the electrical grid as we speak?
Yeah.
It is?
Yes. I've had multiple conversations and meetings with the Duke representatives, and yes, it is scheduled for decommissioning. And quite frankly, when it's decommissioned, they don't want it.
Right.
But then, when he explains to me, and he starts talking about Mason and Deerfield Township and modifications that need to be made before this can happen, it's significant.
You think we're down the list? I mean, like in terms of it being decommissioned?
I think the only thing I've really accomplished with my conversations with Duke is that when it's decommissioned, they will likely turn it over to the city for $1. They don't want them. They don't keep them. They have no interest in it. They don't want to maintain it. You interested? Here, give it.
And they don't put it out for sale, public sale. They, as I understand it, the municipality where an electrical station is decommissioned has the first option.
Yes.
Is that true?
But I didn't get the impression it was a large dollar amount but I do know that when it came to the improvements at Bishop's Quarter and the wires that needed to be immediately modified and moved over to the vet after the fire, it was because they were decommissioning that station, and that part of that meant this wire got moved. That wire was moved within, by Duke standards, rapid time and didn't cost the city a penny.
Right.
And I said, well, why is that being done so quick? And they said, because we're going to do it anyway as part of the decommissioning, just shut up and let us do it. And at the end of the day, we didn't pay anything, and that stopped those wires being right up against the corner of that building.
Second question, one of our speakers today referenced using that parcel as basically like a flat lot, if you will, a parking lot. If you recall, I want to say it's in the summer of 2020, before Mr. Ping or Mr. Hart were with us, there was a diagram presented by a citizen, as Chris Oberhauser actually, depicting the use of that property as a single parking lot, if you will. Have we done any assessment of how many spaces we could get in if there wasn't a garage there, but just a parking lot?
I've never done that. Most of my conversations with Chris were his thought that most of my conversations with Chris, and Chris was one of the leaders in moving the entryway off of First to where that location is. He was very vocal about it. We did some walkabouts with all the residents, and it's made complete sense. But the thing that I've always had the conversation with Chris is that he felt very strongly that Harrison should go all the way through. The problem is that it's not only the topography, it's that it would put us right into the railroad zone, which isn't going to be permitted. And that's why that was most of it. And if it wasn't that, no, I'm not done
So
it.
we haven't done it. The answer is.
Yeah. I
Okay,
stopped
thank
myself.
you.
Any other comments? Mr. Bateman?
I also feel strongly that Harrison should connect to 48, just for the record.
Thank you.
I understand it's a challenge, but it's one that I think that would really open up the potential from creating circuits and traffic flow. So I agree with resident Oberholzer about the value of that. If it's something that's difficult to achieve, I can understand that compromises must be made.
Any other comments? All right, thank you, Mr. Kennedy. There are various committee minutes and reports in your packet. Does anybody have any comments on those? All right, under city council reports and comments, does anybody have anything under that? Mr. Bateman.
I just wanted to touch on a couple of things relative to the traffic and parking issues that have been raised during open forum and in public opinion formats like social media and such. So first of all, I'm really grateful for the discussion that's been engendered as a result of the citizens. I think that's the whole point of the democratic process, is the freedom of speech, freedom to petition the government. I think that's extremely valuable. Driving back from the retreat we had on Saturday, and seeing people with signs and I'm encouraged. That's bringing the issue to the public forum, and I think that's good. Having more people aware of this. Many of our residents don't attend city council meetings. They don't read city council minutes. They don't have any idea of what's happening on an ongoing basis. And so your participation is helpful to get the cause of getting more people aware of some of the things that we're doing to address traffic and parking. So thank you for that, and I'm encouraged by Mr. Kennedy's decision to use the city manager's report section to again illustrate, the interconnectedness to all of this. I think that's extremely valuable as well. Another point I'd like to make is around the conversation about creating a traffic committee. This was something we did discuss at the strategic goal-setting retreat, and some context around our discussion was, at least from my perspective, was first of all that overwhelmingly this is the #1 issue for everyone in Loveland, traffic and parking. And a couple speakers referenced it's an evergreen issue. It's something that many councils before us and perhaps after us will be having to adapt and create a strategy around how to solve these issues. So when it comes to who should be charged with addressing these issues, if this is in fact the #1 priority for the folks in Loveland, and we're looking to try to assign responsible folks, I can't think of anyone better, and I think Mr. Phelps mentioned this at our retreat, that it's really us here and the staff and the people that work for the city. We're the ones responsible for addressing solutions to this issue. And we need to do that with public engagement, of course. That's the best way for us to sort of field test our proposals and to understand if we're on the right track or what are other folks' opinions. But when it comes to trying to handpick 5 residents to help us understand what to do about traffic and parking, it'd be very difficult to find the right 5 people. I think everyone has a solution that they could offer. And so how would we determine whose solutions merit more consideration than others? Another question that has come up is the idea of the residents being able to vote on whether or not a garage should be on the agenda. And so this idea of a referendum has been raised a couple of times. And in an email that I sent to Ms. Enda that has been referenced a couple times in open forum, she asked some questions, several questions about the garage, and one of them was, do you believe that the citizens should vote on this? And my answer was, if we were going to ask for direct taxpayer contribution, like a levy, to fund a garage, yes, I think we should ask the residents to vote. Similar to what we did when we asked the residents if they wanted to have a rec center built. I don't remember the details of this, but I believe it was in the form of a tax levy that would help to fund that facility. In that case, a referendum is more than appropriate. That's the right course of action for a local government to put that decision up to the residents. But I believe that we are a representative democracy, and what we're trying to do is find creative ways to do this that won't have a direct impact on the taxpayer. And so in that case, it's probably more appropriate to do the work that we are currently doing to try to find solutions, to budget for a proposal, to look at the different solutions that could exist in a hypothetical. Now that we've acquired property on which something like this could be built, we're setting the table for a myriad of options that could exist in the future, and none of which currently exist other than the fact that we have invested funds to buy the property in which something like this could be built. So I just wanted to go on record with my opinions about those two things during this format. And then again, just a big thanks to Mr. Kennedy and for the staff, because what we have been doing over the past, since his tenure, are these small incremental moves, and it's he's playing chess with this. It's a strategic board, and he's moved pawns around to try to create a field where we can actually make some big moves. And when you're playing chess and you're at that stage, that's where you have your hand on the bishop, and you're trying to figure out what you're going to do. You're not making those moves haphazardly. You're thinking about very carefully and strategically what you're going to do and what impact it will have on everything that follows. So again, I think that we do encourage more transparency in terms of getting all of the information out. And I think that our residents have really done a great job. They've done their part to try to get us talking a little bit more about this, but it's not like we weren't talking about it before. I think we're just getting closer and closer to that board being set for a significant move that can have a lasting impact on traffic and parking.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other comments or any other topics? Mr. Butler?
Yeah, I also want to recognize the enthusiasm and passion of those individuals who came out on Saturday. And I also recognize that there's very passionate interest on the other side of the issue as well. People who support the building of the garage for various reasons that have been discussed at length tonight. And I think I'm not a person who believes that every issue should be up for referendum. You can California is an example of a state which is almost ungovernable because everything is subject to referendum. But here, in this case, there are passionate positions on both sides. And whatever decision this council makes, we're going to have a lot of people upset about it, one way or the other. But I trust the good faith of both sides that if this matter were put to a vote, that those people the losing party would accept the results of an election. And it's a way to heal people. It's a way to heal the community. And as we've heard tonight, there are passionate positions on both sides of this issue. It's the very kind of topic and very kind of issue which lends itself to putting it out to the public, yay or nay. And as I said, I trust both sides that they would accept the results of a Democratic vote. So I'm going to continue to push for it. My colleagues might get sick of hearing me talk about it, but I think that in this case, it's appropriate and should be considered.
Any further comment? Mr. Hart?
Here's one thing I would say about a referendum in terms of where we've been and where we are right now. In terms of a referendum on a garage, at present, we don't have a proposal. So there's nothing to have a referendum on at present. And I'm not saying that when we get to a place that, we have that discussion. As Mr. Butler says, when the time is right, he says it all the time, when the time is right, we'll have that discussion. I think we kind of need to put the horse back in front of the cart here and let Mr. Kennedy continue to go through these updates and where we are and where we go, and talk about a referendum when we get to a place where we have an actual proposal to discuss with the community. So with that, I close.
Thank you. Any further comment? Vice Mayor?
Just, my observation would be passion is good, and ultimately passion can be the product of not being informed or not understanding things. This process of this council in years before, as well as the time that's yet to come in terms of the discussion of the garage, I think has a duty to sort of dispassion the discussion, present facts, and dialogue is fine on this. And I think that's exactly what we're doing. There's no call, I think, for any kind of rush to judgment on this project until we go through the process. But be present for the process. Talk to us, and we'll continue to, move the chessboard along. I don't know where it'll end up, but the process, I think, is a good one. And the other point I'd make is we're blessed in this city to have a very highly skilled professional staff. You hear us sing the praises of Dave, and it's completely merited. But we also have people that consider for things that are being undertaken by the city, such as, do we want a parking garage? What impact it will have on the environment? There are people, and I'll mention our city engineer, who can weigh in on that and have already. And perhaps when Cindy's here, she can answer some of these questions. But we're again not rushing into something that is going to be detrimental to the environment. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comment? All right, I do want to address something that actually is born of this perhaps passion over a garage and the public outcry, to the degree that there is one. Something that occurred over the weekend. There was a Xavier University student that asked to interview me for a class, which is something I do quite often, at least Zoom or telephone interviews. He had to interview an elected official regarding an issue of the day, asked to discuss the parking facility. I agreed. Very nice young man. Night of the interview, as he was packing up his cameras, which took quite a while, so we had a nice long discussion. I asked him, well, what are you going to do with all this, with the entire interview? He said that he was going to pare it down, something like 2 minutes. He said, I'm only sharing it with my professor. He actually joked and said, don't worry, you're not going to see this on YouTube. I was taken by surprise then, this past Friday, when an individual with his own purported news website emailed asking me about something that I said in that interview and said that he had seen it on YouTube. I forwarded that email to this Xavier University student. I reminded him that he had specifically said that he was not going to put it on YouTube or share it with anyone publicly, only with his professor. I told him I certainly stood behind anything that I said to him. In the interview that night, he just should have been honest with me when he said that. This individual who had taken the student's video from YouTube without permission, he then published an article with that video claiming that several people said that the student felt that the mayor was harsh and that the email made him uncomfortable. I literally just told you what I said in that email. And that several people spoke with the student and said that he's now scared and worried that the city might retaliate against him. The same news individual claimed on social media that I went after the student, scaring the bejesus out of him. The young man actually sent me a lengthy email the following day. He explained that he was required for this assignment to upload the video to YouTube so that his professor could have access to it. He said that the individual who took the video for his own use apparently was alerted to it somehow because some citizen with Google Alerts and certain names sent the alert, which directed them to the video. The student said he had recently learned that he was referenced in an article by the same person without even being contacted by the individual. He said he'd never spoken to the individual, had never heard of their online site. He said he had deleted the video from YouTube. not because of some threat from me, but because, quote, I do not and never did want this video to be public. I replied, thanked him, said I believed him completely. I reached out to the student again on the following day to apologize for jumping to the conclusion that he had violated what he had told me. We spoke by telephone. He would not even let me get my apology out. He said he understood completely why I emailed him. He said, I literally specifically told you would never see it on YouTube. And he said he's very upset that this happened. He was upset that the person that was at the center of all of this had taken his work product and used it the way he did. He said he had asked that person to take the video off his site, to take down the article, but he had not done so. And he said he was looking at other avenues to address that. The young man was certainly upset this weekend, no doubt about it, but it wasn't with me at all. He and I are just fine. In fact, I think if I'd asked him to come here tonight and say this himself, he would have certainly been willing to do that. But he's been through quite enough, being used for someone's personal agenda and financial gain. To me, perhaps the most disgusting part of this is that this individual who started all this painted this young man as some pathetic, scared little boy, both in his article and on social media, having personally spent good amount of time with this young man and talked to him this weekend. I can assure you nothing could be further from the truth. The student is very poised, very sure of himself, professional, determined, certainly not scared of anything, not anything that I did, that's for sure. Finally, just to touch on the controversy that was supposedly at the heart of all this with this article. I had mentioned in this interview that came to my attention that there was a business owner that said that he had come to Loveland after having been told by a council member that we were addressing the parking problem. This was presented in the article as if such a statement to a potential investor was somehow nefarious. To be clear, I see nothing wrong in telling someone who is thinking about spending money investing in our city, but worried about whether or not there is parking, after we've already purchased the properties to build a parking facility and that is out in the public realm, telling them, oh no, we're taking care of parking. But the council member that made that assurance was not me. If the council member that did wishes to own it, so be it, but it wasn't me. But again, I have no problem with it. I think that's what we should be doing, is touting what we're trying to do to address the problems in this city. I felt that this was something I needed to mention here because this became some overblown, ridiculous mess for this young man over the weekend. I think it was completely unnecessary. I do feel bad for him in that he unfortunately learned the hard way, the ugliness of local politics. If there is a silver lining, I will say this. I asked him, well, I hope you at least get a good grade on this project, and he said he got an A. So I suppose all is well that ends well. But I felt the need to set the record straight because I have been unnecessarily vilified, and this young man has been unnecessarily used in this whole scenario. That's all I have. Is there a motion to adjourn? Oh, we do. We have a motion to executive session. You're usually the man.
I'll move to adjourn to executive session under Ohio Revised Code, Section 121.22G1, to consider the employment of a public employee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Call the roll, please.
Mr. Blair?
Yes.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
This time.
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Butler?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Phelps?
Yes.
Mr. Ping?
Yes.
Mayor Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Bateman?
Yes.
Mr. Blair?
On behalf of all Paxton Rangers, I vote no.
Motion carries 6-1.